as a topic, this comes up constantly. You know, what's it like being a Twitch streamer? What's it like being a YouTuber? Can I do it? Do you have any advice? Anything like that? Every time I go live on Twitch, you're going to at least have like a dozen or so people come in over the course of a couple hours and ask questions about being a YouTuber. What would you recommend? And all these things. So when you see a video pop up that says, don't be a YouTuber, it's definitely something I have a ton of opinions on. So we're going to watch it. We're going to see what this guy's saying. I'm not familiar with his content, although I do believe this is a alternate channel and he has a bigger channel. So let's see what he's saying.
Don't be a YouTuber. Or do, because I'm not your mother, probably.
True.
But before you do, there's a lot you should know that really doesn't generally get brought up on this platform. This isn't universal, a lot of this is coming from my own personal experience, but after having been invested on this website for 6 or so years now, there are just some things I wish I knew first. For all of the wacky drama on YouTube, it's actually one of the most supportive globs of people that I've ever encountered. Any YouTuber you talk to will be highly encouraging. I mean, of course you should get involved because literally anyone can do it. It's very similar to the classic dream of, say, becoming a big Hollywood actor, writer, director, whatever it is along those lines. Until you realize that all of your favorite actors are related to a producer who's related to a musical artist who's like the nephew of a record executive. It's a very nepotistic industry to say the least. But
the good thing about YouTube is literally there are no barriers for entry. Anybody can do it. You don't need to be particularly smart. You don't need to be particularly charismatic. You don't need a ton of experience in any kind of like niche field. You don't need to have gone to school for a long time. You don't need to physically be anywhere. You don't even really need good equipment or anything like that. Like a lot of the big YouTubers got started with using their phone as a microphone and camera. It really is something that anyone can get into, so long as you are, you know, either passionate or driven enough to actually stick to doing it. And obviously being reflective is the number one thing I always say when anyone asks me about like, oh, how do you succeed as being a YouTuber, is just being able to reflect on what's working and what's not working. Because almost every time I check somebody's account when they DM me and they're like, oh, you know, YouTube's not working out for me, but I've been trying really hard and I've been putting a ton of effort into it. Whenever I look at their account, it's they're doing the same thing over and over again, and it's not been working the entire time, but they still keep doing the same thing in the exact same way without altering almost anything, or they're doing something that would have maybe worked if they're an exception or 10 years ago, but now it doesn't work anymore, and they're dead set on going in that direction. There's a qualifier here which we might get into in a little while. It depends on if you're doing this for like, do I want to grow or am I doing it for fun? But obviously we're talking about being a YouTuber as a profession as opposed to just like doing it as a hobby, in which case do whatever you want.
YouTube actually is that dream because it technically has no barriers to entry. You don't need to be in a specific geographic location. You don't need to know someone to get your foot in the door. And you don't even need any professional quality gear or even professional skills. You just need either a really good idea, a solid grind set attitude, or both. Ideally both. I honestly believe it is the most equal opportunity platform to have ever existed in human history. And the reason why I compared it to a classical Hollywood dream is because that dream is dead. A survey in 2017 found that 34% of all kids want to become YouTubers as a career. Meanwhile, a much more recent survey in 2022 saw that number skyrocket to...
Have you seen the stats here? Have you seen the stats here? So China YouTube and vlogger, you can't see this because my camera's in the way, but the bottom one on 18% for China is YouTube/vlogger, whereas for the United Kingdom and the United States, the bottom is astronaut, and then obviously for them you've got astronaut being the highest, teacher being the second highest, musician, professional athlete, whereas people in the US and people in the UK want to be vloggers and YouTubers. Obviously there's a problem with that for society in general. I would love to see the percentage of YouTube or, you know, internet content consumed by each of these demographics to know whether that's like a major factor, because obviously if you're growing up as a kid and your parents are handing you an iPad and you're sat watching YouTube all the time, you're watching fucking Jake Paul or whatever, you're probably more likely to grow up like, oh yeah, I want to do this, as opposed to if you're like in school and doing these academic activities, which is probably a difference between the regions.
Survey in 2022 saw that number skyrocket to
But yeah, it's definitely a popular job.
75%, with around 30% of them specifically gearing themselves towards becoming vloggers. For a career that didn't even exist a decade ago, that is pretty damn wild. And I very much blame, or maybe not blame, but I attribute a huge part of that to what I said before. Just how encouraging YouTubers are that anyone can do this. But that's not really the whole story, and a whole ton of tips that you hear.
I do think anybody can do this. Not everybody will, but I do think anybody can. I just think it's, having done it myself and seen other people do it, I really think if you actually stuck with it and you had like I guess I'm about to disqualify what I've just said about anybody, but it's literally like, it's not even a massive amount of analytical ability or anything. It's just like the self-awareness to know that if something's not working, you're the problem, and to just change little things one by one, and then eventually it will almost certainly work out. But I've had people argue with me about this, and I don't know, maybe it's survivorship bias, but fuck knows.
Different people like, well, I guess me, tend to be coated with a healthy slathering of survivor bias, which is the tendency to concentrate on those who made it rather than those who did not. And I think that's understandable, because those that did try and fail don't actually have a voice on this platform, which makes it real difficult to get their perspective. For example, my flagship channel just hit over 1 million subscribers, which is actually not as rare as you may think. In 2022, it's estimated that somewhere between 25 to 30,000 channels have over 1 million subscribers. However, when you put that into perspective, YouTube also estimates that there are roughly
millions of
37
accounts.
million channels on the platform. Not users, not viewers, just channels. Channels that are actually producing content, which puts channels like mine in like the top 0.08%. And I don't say that to just like, statistically jerk myself off on camera. I mean, to be fair though, that ratio is pretty hot. But I say it more to highlight just how many unheard voices there really are. Despite being the most equal opportunity platform in human history, the odds are still pretty astronomically stacked against you if you want to make YouTube a career. And I think the vast majority of people fail for one very simple reason. The most common factor I see with successful channels is pure obsession. You need to live and breathe your content. For example, I have this Luffy. I live it and breathe it. That was creepy.
That was a real good sniff. Yeah, that was a real perverted sniff.
It's anime, history, gaming, science, finance, beauty, like whatever. It honestly doesn't matter what the content is as much.
Yeah, because this is the thing. A lot of people think that they're going to start a YouTube channel and it's just going to be super easy and content's just always going to be there, and it's going to, like, it's hard, man, coming up with ideas of what's going to be a video, like, and then actually making that video, like sitting down and doing all the necessary steps to make a video. It's harder than people think. People think being a YouTuber is turn on a camera and talk, which is, funnily enough, what I'm doing right now. But this is the only reason I have this platform to be able to do this, is because I've spent 3 years doing the hard stuff on another channel to grow an audience to be able to do this in the first place. A lot, and even still, I'm gonna have to like make a thumbnail for this. I'm gonna have to, edit the video, which will be trimming a couple things if I like get up to go answer the door or whatever. But making the audio, making sure the audio is fine, finding a topic that's interesting to talk about, that I have something to say. Stuff like this still does take time. It takes energy. I think people believe, and this is a number one thing that for any aspiring YouTubers out there that I see people do all the time, is they just think that it's good enough for them to be passionate about something, but not use that as like a not go outside of that to actually do the necessary steps to pursue YouTube properly. So what I mean by that is, people think that they can just play a video game and then just chop up them playing a video game and put it on YouTube, and they'll get famous from it, and it'll become a job, and they'll be able to, grow like PewDiePie did fucking however many years ago that was. And that doesn't work anymore. YouTube's gone away from that because people watch live streams instead for that kind of stuff, for the live interaction and things. And if you're banking on you're the exception, that you're an enigmatic, charismatic, like amazing, 1 in a million personality, chances are you're probably not. And if you think you are, you're probably not aware enough of your own shortcomings to know that that's probably a bad idea. So a lot of people do content like that where they're like, oh, I really want to be a YouTuber. So what are you going to do about it? And then their solution is, I'm going to play 10 hours of The Witcher 3 and then chop up the videos in just like straight segments, no cuts, not the funny stuff, not anything else, put no effort into it whatsoever, other than these chunks of video, and then upload it. Like playing The Witcher Part 1, Part 2, you're not working at YouTube there. You're playing a game and then uploading the footage. Like that's not what YouTubers do, by and large. Maybe that'll work for like one person in every 10 million that tries it, but it's probably not going to be you.
As it matters that you are absolutely obsessed with it. It could even be video making itself. Like, you might not be obsessed with the topic you're making a video on, but you're obsessed with the process of making the actual video. That's perfectly valid. The reason why you need to be obsessed, though, is because the bad times of video making are going to heavily outweigh the good times. For example, to make a Grand Line review video, I have to write a roughly 2,500 word script. And not only that, but I need to do that 4 days a week for that channel alone. Add a New World review in and do it in a room, which I'm doing right now, then that means I'm writing at least one whole essay per day. And that gets hard. Often I just want to do anything else.
That's a grind set right there. He's doing a lot of writing. I don't do that much writing. I was doing like a couple of years ago when I was really, trying to grow as quickly as possible and stuff like that. But I've taken a bit of a backseat with it now. Like now I do the second channel content, which is this, react to stuff, requires no research whatsoever. And then the main channel stuff, I write one script, maybe 2 scripts a week, but they can be anywhere from like 2,500 words to 5,000 words, and usually they're on topics that require me to do a lot of tens of hours of research per one. So a lot of the time I'm just like watching videos, reading wiki articles, reading journalist pieces, things like that. So a lot of my work is not actually writing things or the video process. It's just research and stuff like that. But man, writing 4 scripts a week, never again would I be doing that. That sounds awful.
Isn't writing. But this is where obsession carries you pretty hard. Because I'm so arguably unnaturally invested in what I'm talking about, that passion outweighs the grind. And you can apply that to any part of the process. Like
a lot of people get burned out on doing this as well. Like I personally did. If you can do this for years and write 4 scripts a week for years, congratulations, you're going to fucking make a killing on YouTube. You're going to do real good. But I think most people, once you hit a level of success where you're earning good money, you can sort of like lay off a little bit. Most people will probably do that unless they're really driven for one specific goal, like I'm going to reach 1 million subs, 5 million subs, etc.
Say editing, what you guys see on screen is like a fun 3-second effect. But what you don't see is like the hour and a bit that it took me to research and implement that effect.
This is why I hate editing. This is why I employ an editor, because what you see, if you're going to do that like every 30 seconds for like a 10-minute long video, just like a little thing, you might not even know how to do that. And then you've got to research how to do it, then get it to work. And then maybe you add that to your like repertoire of skills you can do for another video. But that's constant that you're having to do that, and you need to find the right sound effect and find the right image and find the right small video clip. Like it's awful. It's awful. And then most people don't even care, and it adds almost nothing to the video.
Tearing my hair out in frustration until it actually works. If I wasn't obsessed with what I was talking about, I would have quit a long time ago. So on the bright side, YouTube is one career where having a crippling and potentially socially awkward obsession can really pay off. But if you just like something, or even worse, if you just like the idea of being a YouTuber, then you are
not going to make it.
Going to fail.
Yep.
Even if you do succeed, there is a price to success. And by far the biggest price is time. Making even the simplest of videos when you're inexperienced takes a long time. However long you're thinking, triple it, quadruple it, maybe even do the other one, the one that's even more, the 5, I don't know what it is, quintuple. Do that, or maybe even more. And then when you do know how to make videos, you start getting more ambitious, which just adds more time. And the people at the very top do have a much healthier work-life balance because they can afford to hire employees, which frees up time for some sort of social life. But that's not the vast majority of YouTubers. That's not even me. And for those of you who are just beginning, it is going to be years and years on this journey before you can even think of the concept of hiring someone, which means that all of that time being put into the channel is just yours. And so if YouTube...
So one thing I always explain to people, and that I've explained to like real life friends, because obviously when I grew up, we're going to go into a mad tangent here. This is going to be a long React video, story time. So I grew up relatively not well off, in a place where people generally aren't very well, don't have a lot of money. And I didn't go to, college or university or whatever, no formal education. And I basically just worked shitty jobs. And then I was out of work, and then I had a bunch of health issues, etc., etc. But most people I know, aside from the ones that, dead in prison or drug dealers, they all work like relatively normal people jobs, right? They're, bricklayers, carpet fitters, work for, just random company X, Y, or Z. Not doing anything too crazy, like a policeman is probably the most interesting job that one of my friends has. And obviously, when I started doing YouTube, it was like I didn't have anything going on at the time. I was living at my parents' house. I had no bills. And I could literally just sit there, and I did. For one whole year, I just sat there and made YouTube videos for 12 to 16 hours per day, 7 days a week, for 1 year. And after a month, I was making a couple $100 a month and things were going good and I could see growth. So it was spurring me on. But I just obsessively did it for a year. And then about a year and a half later, I had 100,000 subs and things were good and I was making good money. But for the first year, for the time I put in, you could work at McDonald's for 4 hours per day and earn probably triple what I made in that year. For doing that, and you'd be working, a quarter of the time. But obviously I was building something for myself. So when people ask me, what do you recommend? I can't really give what I did, because at the end of the day, most people's lives are designed to keep you in the position that you're in. Because you go to work, you wake up in the morning, you go to work for 8 hours, you come home. What do you want to do when you come home? Something to relax, something to have fun. You probably don't want to turn on your computer and start grinding YouTube videos. All the boring shit, the research, the script writing, the video editing, stuff like that. And then go to bed and then get up and go to work and repeat 5 days a week, 6, 7 if you're working weekends. Then maybe you've got a family, you've got a social life. It's real hard for an adult to get into doing YouTube properly. Because you're going to prioritize doing the things that are fun. And what I always tell my friends is that I would like to help you do something, but I can only tell you that this is what's going to happen. You're not going to be motivated to do it. You're going to want to do fun stuff instead. You're going to want to watch the football game with your dad at the pub on a Sunday. You're going to want to, play some video games, have a game of Dota or whatever else. You're going to want to watch some YouTube videos, watch a couple hours on Netflix, hang out with your spouse, whatever it's going to be. And you're not going to do this. So for the vast majority of people, you physically cannot do this. You just don't have the capacity, you don't have the time, you don't have the drive to do it, because you have to basically say for the next year or two, I'm going to work on YouTube, or work on this other skill that's going to take me out of my daily routine of a life that I'm maybe not happy living in and doing a job I don't like or whatever. And for the vast majority of people, that is the barrier of why you can't do YouTube. It's just simply because your life is not designed for you to be able to, go to work and then work on all this other stuff that's going to maybe change, your daily life eventually. And it's not a guarantee. You could, and this is one of the other things, most people don't see progress right away. So they get a month into doing this where they have no social life at all, no spare time. and then they don't see any progress and they're like, fuck all this, I'm just going to go back to having fun in my spare time because, you know, time's important. So yeah, I mean, rant over, I guess.
YouTube is your hobby, then sure, that's fine. You can afford to chuck in a little bit of time here and not a lot of time there. But if you have ideas of becoming more serious than that, then honestly, you should probably be prepared to just write off your social life. To be clear, I'm not saying that you should do that. I'm saying that it's a bit of an inevitable cost, especially when you're just starting, because you'll probably already have a full-time job to support all of the living that I hear you like to do. So when you get home from work, you won't have time to do anything that you want to because you will need to be making videos. And on weekends, mate, that is prime video making time. If you're not using those, then you're probably not posting videos, because to post videos, you need to make videos, and to make videos, you need to use the time to make them. It's a lot. And again, even the really simple ones take a long time to make. For example,
unless you're doing like meme edits or something.
To 24 hours to make a standard Grand Line review video. That includes research, writing, recording, editing, thumbnail making, and whatever other production needs pop up. And that time cost is after having streamlined the process to what I think is currently its most efficient.
And also, this is a very good point he's about to make. I assume he's going to make it, but it's taken him that long after doing this for years and having all this experience, knowing the tools, knowing what he's going to do, knowing the formula that his audience likes, not having to do the research of like, why did this video perform well? Where can I capture an audience in this way and things like that. So yeah, it's even more time. Like for me, on average, I'd say when I was editing my own videos, a video essay that I do on the main channel now would probably take between 25 and 50 hours each. I've had ones that took 80, 90 hours, and they were the ones that performed the best. And then I've got videos now that are over 100 hours in and still aren't even finished with the script writing. It's still in the research process. So how many people are going to be able to dedicate that amount of time and have a real life? It's not feasible, really.
It also doesn't necessarily get better when you do get to hire staff, like say editors. I have 2 editors for Grand Line Review who edit half the videos whilst I edit the other half. And I can't count the amount of times I've run into a situation where I've been invited out, because that happens sometimes for some reason. But I can't go, because if I do go out, it means I won't have the time to have a project ready for one of my editors. So what am I meant to say in that situation? Sorry, Mr. Editor, but you're not getting paid this week because I want to have a fun night out. Or alternatively, I pay them.
This is why I pay my editor regardless. I just pay him a flat fee per month, and then if I don't get the video ready, he just gets paid regardless. Like, it just is what it is, because I think that's like the fairest way to do it.
Them regardless, because it was my fault for not being prepared in time, and that night out ends up just costing me a disgusting amount. And I actually think that Mr. Beast is a great example to bring up here. I often sing his praises for just having taken control of this platform with increasingly brilliant ideas, but that guy has no life outside of video making.
Yep,
he lives
literally
in his
no
studio,
life.
just spends 24/7 working. The 10 minutes of video that he releases every month or so is the result of weeks and months of just non-stop obsessive work. And if that's not a lifestyle that appeals to you, then maybe aiming to be a YouTuber isn't the greatest of ideas.
Yeah, but I would say obviously Mr. Beast is on the fucking extreme end of the spectrum, right? He's not like, I'm not Mr. Beast, am I? In any way, in any conversation. I think most people are like, if Mr. Beast's over here, I think most of us are like over here. And then people that are, not doing it are maybe a little bit over here. He's just... I watched a couple of interviews with him, specifically the Joe Rogan one, and he doesn't watch movies. He's like never watched a movie before. He doesn't watch TV shows. He has no idea about cultural references or what's popular in culture. Not a clue, because all he does is make YouTube videos. And I mean, he's the best at it. He's the biggest channel, the biggest growing channel. He does insane numbers, so it makes sense. But he's a standout, right?
Because every bit of sweet success you taste is going to make you more and more willing to give that much more of your life away. And that's to say nothing of the literal years of time investment that you may need to put in before anything starts paying off. I mention this a lot, but it's never been more relevant than it is now. I was making videos for 3 years before I saw a single cent. Not that everything is about money, but look, eventually you do need to find a way to sustain your obsessive activities.
Yeah.
And continuing along the lines of obsession...
I'm surprised he even continued for 3 years, because most people don't. Unless you're doing it as a hobby. And I will say, I'm not going to say this to like shit on people that do YouTube for a hobby. I'm just going to say there's like a distinction between the two people, right? If you have machinations or, you know, plans to make YouTube a job eventually, you're way, way more likely to quit before somebody who just does it as a hobby. But somebody who does it as a hobby, I think it might be less likely to actually succeed to turn it into a job, because they're the people who are more likely to, at least in my mind, how this would make sense is they're the ones that are more likely to be set in their ways of like, oh, I just enjoy doing this, so I'm just going to do it this way, as opposed to I'm going to analytically look at, you know, what's going wrong, what are my peers doing, what should I change, you know, do I need to change something about myself, do I need to change something about my content, what concessions can I make, things like that. But they will obviously have more longevity, which means that they might just, you know, look out, I guess, and get some form of audience from doing it that way. Whereas people who are just like, I want YouTube to be a job, as soon as they've not seen progress for months, they're way more likely to just be like, yeah, fuck all this.
One thing you need to know is that YouTube is a platform designed to get you addicted to success. As a creator, I often feel like a dog being fed a delicious treat by
analytics
YouTube every time I perform the trick it is they want to see.
So terrible.
Within the creator dashboard, they reward you with literal fireworks when one of your videos performs amazingly, which of course leads to more views, more growth, more revenue,
and then the other videos pop up and it'll say video 10 out of 10 and it'll have a grey arrow on it and it'll tell you how terrible the video performed, even though you put tens of hours into it and you just want to fucking, I'll never make a video like that ever again. It happens all the time to me. It's very rare I get a 1 out of 10. They're usually a 10 out of 10 recently, and they suck, and it's very upsetting.
It's all very addictive. And that only makes me more willing to invest time into it because I need that hit, you know? But it also has a very harsh come down because when you do perform badly, not only does YouTube not reward you, but it actively punishes you. Every time I have a low performing video, I feel like, oh, it's just...
Yeah, my life's over. Literally.
Really difficult to do.
The anxiety of being a YouTuber is when you release like 2 videos back to back that are 2 of the worst performing videos of the last year, which I've had happen to me recently. And you're just looking at it like, that's it, I'm fucked. That, like, all that money I've just spent, all that time I've just spent, the opportunity costs because I only release 1 video a week. That's it. I'm done. My numbers are going to be fucked. I'm going to have no job, no fans. It's a mentally taxing job. A lot of people obviously don't take that into consideration. They think it's the easiest shit in the world. Reading negative comments all the time, having people, you know, attack you online for just no reason whatsoever. Constantly disparaging what you're doing, the analytical aspect of it that you just constantly check in, and when it goes badly, it's mentally, it's rough. It's definitely not everybody can like shoulder that.
Do things like say sleep, which I've heard is pretty important. And it also makes me really adverse to taking risks in terms of video content. I know what my YouTube audience wants, so I give it to them, and I tend to avoid passion projects that could harm or even sink the channel. But again, this is where obsession comes in clutch. I am so obsessed with One Piece that I am happy to talk about anything. It really doesn't matter because this is my favorite thing. And if I didn't have that acute obsession, I think always having to min-max content could be quite soul-destroying. And that's before you bring up the idea of putting yourself out there publicly. Because something you should be prepared for is the fact that some people are just going to hate you. Sometimes
he's hitting every point.
And there's some constructive criticism that you can take on board. But most of the time, it's just going to be people saying they hate your face or your voice or...
Yeah, and also it makes it harder to accept constructive criticism from people when you're just constantly, you know, bombarded with shit. Because a lot of people don't understand what criticism is. They think, I don't like this thing that you're doing, so now I'm going to tell you about it in a pretty abrasive way. And if you don't agree with me, you can't accept criticism. When in reality, their opinion as an individual makes no difference whatsoever. Good criticism's like somebody who knows what they're talking about and says like, oh, you know, the audio is a problem, or you know, you could do this for the video, or I think this would have been a better way to go about it. As opposed to just somebody being like, I don't like this video, then don't click it. Like, that's not criticism. But obviously, you get that after 10 people have just told you that you sound like a fucking donkey, and they want to strangle you in the garden or something, like you're probably not going to be as receptive, because it's just like an accumulation of just being constantly shouted at by people for just no reason whatsoever.
Anything, literally anything, whatever you can see, whatever you can hear, someone hates it. Legitimately, whatever you put out there, someone is going to have a reaction of visceral disgust to. All of which is to say that if you're particularly sensitive, either prepare yourself for this or maybe rethink the idea of being a YouTuber altogether, because it's very exposing and it could destroy you. You know, I was once actually sent a death threat because of my opinions on comic book pirates. Good times. Look,
I've had this. I've had people try to hack my bank account. I've had people try to steal my identity and take out credit cards. I've had people call my phone at like 4 o'clock in the morning and say that they know where I live. I've had tons of threatening emails, like text messages, messages on Discord, messages on YouTube. I've had people come on my Twitch stream and tell me they wish I died of the disease that I had. That's a very serious one. Multiple times, many times. People be fucking wild out here, man. And that's because I said this video game's not very good, is it? So there you go. People are just crazy.
Didn't have to be this way, but it's the sort of thing that you need to expect. To quickly touch on business, if running your own business is something that doesn't appeal to you, then this also may not be the right career path. There's this romantic idea amongst viewers that YouTube is all about the passion, just dude in room doing his thing for the world to see. So honest, so raw. But then as soon as you start making your first cent, everything changes. Because whether you see this as a business or not, the government sees it as a business, and so you need to treat it like one. Which means that you are now subject to a whole new side of law that you need to be on top on, or else you could get into some serious
taxes, liability, copyright. Like there's a whole fucking thing to go into. Then obviously there's the fact that you'll be constantly bombarded by sponsor stuff, management stuff. There's a lot of snakes, scams, terrible contracts. You're gonna have to speak to lawyers. It's way more involved than what people give it credit for. I think probably like 20 to 30% of my time is spent dealing with shit that's completely unrelated to videos.
Trouble. This is a very common story with YouTubers, especially younger ones, but the amount of people I've heard that just forgot to pay their tax on their YouTube income is terrifyingly astonishing. And that caused them big problems because they weren't prepared to run even the most basic aspect of a business. And I'm not saying I'm amazing at this. I despise admin. I am so shit at it, and it's by far my least favorite part of this career. But this is, again, where obsession pays off. I love talking about fictional pirates so much that I am willing to sit down and just dive into my personal living hell that is admin. And then there's people. It's kind of weird, actually. Despite the stats I showed you earlier with like the staggering amount of kids wanting to be YouTubers, the majority of society still doesn't even recognize this as a real job. I would say that when you get to talking
just as a personal anecdote, when I was in England trying to rent somewhere, even though I could prove that every month, like clockwork, a fucking payment came in from a company you might have heard of called Google, nobody would let me rent. Like, they just literally wouldn't let me rent their property because they just didn't believe that I had a job. They thought I was like dealing drugs or something, and like it was like a front, and I was like, I don't know, a big time criminal. Because you'd explain to them, like, everything would be agreed, and then they'd be like, oh, what do you do for work? And I'm like, oh, I'm self-employed. And they're like, oh, what do you do? I'm a YouTuber. Just done. Just fucking... They'd ask me, like, oh, what do you mean, as a hobby? And I'm like, no, it's my job. Like, you ask me what I do for work, I do YouTube. Eventually, I just started saying I work in marketing. I just work in marketing. Because that's so boring, nobody's going to ask you. And essentially, it's true, because that's how we make money, ad revenue, which is marketing. So, yeah, people don't recognize this as a job at all. Obviously, some younger people do, but a lot of the time, if you tell somebody in public, like, oh, I'm a YouTuber, they'll be like, oh, do you know Jake Paul? Like, oh, are you friends with KSI? Like, it's awful. I hate it. That's why I try not to tell people about it in person. It's just cringe.
To people who are around 30 plus, it's a very foreign concept, so you should be prepared for some awkward discussions. A lot of times people can ask what in any other profession would be considered quite an invasive question. Stuff like, how much money do you make and how do you make it? And I still don't really know how to answer that question, especially with people I still don't really know. I tend to find that people fall into one of two camps when they discover that I'm a YouTuber. Either it's, holy crap, that's amazing, you know, the sort of putting you up on a pedestal and worshipping the idea thing, which comes with a lot of its own problems. Or there's the other way, which is to be completely dismissive of everything you do. Because to them it probably
I've had both of
like
these, yeah.
said, I play with Lego on my bedroom floor for a living. And here's a good example from my real life. So I still do some theater work from time to time, and it's well past the point where I can keep my actual career a secret. As a result, it often does come up in conversation because, you know, it's a fun novelty profession. So one time I was in between shows chatting with the group, and the question came up of, what would you do if you could no longer do YouTube? Which is a great question, actually, one that I ask myself.
Die. Be homeless. Not have a job, basically.
Every time a video performs poorly. But before I could answer, another slightly older member of the company interjected and said, well, he'd have to actually work.
I get this comment all the time on YouTube. Oh, you should get a real job. You should get a real job. Which I'm not even going to bother going into the... It's like a 10-minute just me ranting about like how many hours it takes. And I'm not saying YouTube's the hardest job in the world, because it's not. But I do subscribe to the opinion that you shouldn't, you know, downplay what somebody else does, especially if you've got no clue, no concept whatsoever, like what actually goes into it. What's hard for one person is going to be, you know, easy for another person, and vice versa, etc., etc. But I get that all the time. Like, oh, you need to get what's going to happen when you go into the real world and get a real job? It's like, I've had real jobs; they fucking sucked. My job, despite all the problems, is actually fairly good most of the time. So fuck a real job. I'll keep my fake internet job if that's okay. Please keep watching these videos.
Which elicited a big group laugh that I just had to go along with. It was either that or get like very confrontational. Because I very rarely get angry in
just
real
take
life.
it.
This was one of those situations where I really could have gone off. Because it was a joke, yeah, but you know, there's always truth in jokes. And I could tell that...
It's usually people that are salty as well, because if they knew how much money this dude was earning for his fake job, it just pisses people off. I've had it before where I've had like real life friends that I've known for like over a decade that I used to work with, like literally get in my face and be like, oh, there's a fly or a mosquito or something. Get in my face and be like, oh, you don't even know what real work is. Like, I work my fingers to the bone, wake up 4 o'clock every morning. It's like, how is that my fault? Like, what do you want me to do about that? And why are you being this way? Like, why? We've known each other for a decade. Like, why are you doing this to me?
From her perspective, I don't work. I just sort of fuck around all day and somehow make money doing it. While she has real work to do, like a job that makes you get up in the morning and go to a place to do a task. And that's how you make a real living. And that's the sort of thing you'll have to deal with. People not considering what you do a quote real job. I don't know, you don't carry bricks or you don't enter numbers into a spreadsheet. I don't know. I don't know what a real job is anymore. I just fuck around all day and somehow make a living just doing it. You know what? Leave a comment in the comment place if you have a real job and tell me what it is. I'm legitimately interested. But in conclusion, unless you have a crippling obsession with something, maybe rethink the whole YouTube thing. Because it will cost you time, it will cost you mentally, and it will cost you socially. I don't care how good you think you are at balancing a work life, it is going to cost you. And you could spend years paying all of those costs, all for the insanely low chance of actually breaking through. And these are things no one tells you because all of the advice you hear
They're
is
very
from
glamorized.
1% of people who actually made it. But also, if you want to do it, go for it. Do it now. Because this is still a very unique opportunity, but maybe keep these things in mind before, during, and after you decide to invest years and years of your life into it.
Oh, it's a Asmongold reaction to it as well. So yeah, this video is just full of truth. Maybe some truth that people don't want to hear. There's definitely some different aspects to look at this. Again, I'm of the opinion that people, if somebody sat down and said, I am going to be a YouTuber and I'm not super passionate about anything, I think you can manufacture a YouTube career. Just like you're not passionate about working in McDonald's, or you're not passionate about working in a car wash, you're not passionate about sitting in a room inputting numbers into a spreadsheet. So if you treat YouTube just like a job and you are, going to put in a bunch of effort and a bunch of time and research and things like that, you can just make YouTube a job, or you can make some aspects of YouTube a job, like being an editor or being a scriptwriter or a researcher or a thumbnail designer. Like, there's a lot of different facets to it, but obviously not everybody can do YouTube for all the reasons I've listed and more. But I do think most people do have the potential to, given like the perfect scenario of being able to understand all these things, which of course is the same for pretty much everything in the world, I guess. But there we go. A really good video. Really enjoyed this. A lot of really good points. And thank you very much for watching. See you next time. Peace out.